Of populations. Evolution is our present world and the billions of years before us. Evolution defined. Evolution is the development of characteristics within a species over a long period of time. What does it look like? Well, evolution cannot be observed in any given moment, but you can easily spot how a species has evolved by comparing average members of species in different generations. As you can see on the right, the whale, an aquatic mammal, originated from land mammals. So you can see an easy comparison. You can see how the whale evolved. Let's go over a little bit more of why. So why do species evolve? Evolving is a means of adapting to an ecosystem in order to live long enough to reproduce. A species will see adapted characteristics over a long period of time via natural selection. So natural selection is Darwin's theory of evolution. That is, all species of organisms arise and develop throughout the natural selection of small inherited variations that increase the individual's ability to compete, survive, and reproduce. So thinking more about that, this theory of evolution, it's basically claiming that every single species is under this theory. Every single species applies, including humans, including your cat, your dog maybe, everyone, every single species, over a long period of time, is the result of their ancestors who have reproduced, and before that, those ancestors that have reproduced. So, the inherited variations that are constantly given to the next offspring and that after that is why we are the way we are today. It's pretty crazy to think about. So if you say you have a given amount of a species, say you have 100 dogs, and there's only enough food for 80 of them. Now, 2% of those dogs are long-snouted. The rest have pug-nosed snouts, or flat snouts. The 2% with the long snouts are able to get the food, and the rest can't. So which dogs of all the dogs are going to be able to reproduce? Of course, it's going to be the 2% with the smug noses, or with the long snout noses. So those 2% will have enough food, they'll reproduce, and they'll make more long-snouted dogs, right? Because they are also long-snouted. So these inherited variations of these traits that were important for survival are now being seen again in the next generation. And of course, all of the bad traits, the pug-snouted dogs, don't survive, right? And neither do their traits. And so the next generation, we only see long snouts. That's exactly how evolution goes. But it's on a long period. So yes, it's all hereditary, right? It's the passing of genes to the next, and to the next, and to the next. So think of you, think of your parents, and think of their parents before them. You all share many of the same hereditary genes. It could be your nose shape, eye color, height, and hair type, just to name a few. So just think about that. Think about how those before you and those before you, they all had these different traits that were superior to other traits. It's why they survived, it's why they reproduced, and it's why you are here now. It's the exact same thing with every single living species, every single organism on this planet. So this act of filtration, or another way of saying it, the act that certain species survive and certain individuals of species survive and others don't, is called natural selection. This is, individuals of a species with the most effective characteristics will typically live longer than other individuals of the same species with less effective characteristics. Those favored traits will be passed down to future generations. Yeah, so look at the little image on the right. You can see there are these 3 giraffes. Now, of course, the shortest giraffe dies in the second picture, and that's because it has the least inherited trait. The other 2 giraffes are tall enough to eat the leaves, and of course, the other giraffe is not tall enough. If we can apply this to real living, and we'll have a great example of it next when we think in depth about giraffes, think about it like this. Of course, there's food on the ground, right? Of course, in a savanna or Sahara, a desert or a plains, wherever giraffes live, of course, there's going to be food on the ground. But over time, there is always going to be scarcity. And giraffes with longer necks are going to be able to access more food than giraffes with shorter necks. So over time, over a long period of time, more giraffes with longer necks will survive and reproduce, and eventually you'll see the entire species or almost all of the species with long necks, and that's because of natural selection. Giraffes. So to get a better grasp around evolution over a long period of time, we can focus on the singular chain of species and how and why it evolved. Over the course of 16 million years, ancestors of the giraffe don't have elongated necks until less than 7 million years ago. The trend of longer necks is due to a few factors of natural selection. As you can see, I'm not going to keep reading from that. Look at these 5 different, very, very different appearing species. These are the ancestors of our modern day giraffe at the bottom. And of course, isn't it crazy? Its ancestors before it had shorter necks, but over time it developed an elongated neck. So this is why. Number 1, individuals with elongated necks experience less food scarcity and tended to reproduce and survive more often than those with obsolete neck lengths. Yeah, just once again, it's crazy to think that we have all these long-necked giraffes because the ancestors before them also had long necks, and they were superior to the other individuals of the species with shorter necks. Number 2, and another big thing when it comes to many species that value other characteristics during mating. Individuals with elongated necks have an advantage during mating season. A longer neck is more effective for neck swinging fights. The females typically mate with the victor. So, the crazy thing that giraffes do is they do a thing called necking. Yeah, quote unquote necking. And this is when they fight over a female. 2 males will fight over a female. And it's a lot of swinging with their necks and heads. And usually the victor is the one that does not back down, the other backs down. And so, of course, the victor is the one that mates with the female, as it goes in most animal species that see this trend. And if you think about it in a big picture, the victor is mating with a female, which means its offspring, the victor's offspring, are going to have longer necks in general, which means over a long period of time we're going to see more giraffes with long necks than shorter necks, because these are going to be the generations, the descendants of victors, right? Pretty crazy to think about. So an ecosystem's role. What does an ecosystem do that leads to this? We've probably already learned a little bit about it, but a species ecosystem plays a massive part in the evolution of that species. If the ecosystem lacks certain resources, but is plentiful in others, the appropriate characteristics in a species will be seen more often as the species evolves. So you take whales, for example. You can see whales on the right. Ancestors of our modern-day whale had hind legs and ate semi-large mammals. Isn't that crazy? Hind legs, just like a dog. As the species dissipated as in like grew apart, found different ecosystems, as it spread apart across the continent, you can see that those aquatic ecosystems were found by a few of these dog-like creatures, these ancestors of our modern-day whale. And as they found these aquatic ecosystems with smaller prey, they gradually evolved into aquatic life forms. And this is for many different things. And we already covered natural selection, right? But these dogs were not as suited as other mammals were. There are probably certain dogs with smaller mouths that were better for eating these small creatures, right? So over many, many generations, the dogs with the smaller mouths are going to live longer and reproduce way more often than dogs with longer mouths. And if you think about that long term, that's why whales have smaller mouths, because they're predestined for eating smaller foods like krill and shrimp, right? And also, if it's a very aquatic ecosystem, it's an ocean or it's a large body of water, usually an ocean or like a bay. This ecosystem is much more suitable for swimming mammals. So the whale loses the ancestors of the whale lose the hind legs, right? They over time will lose the legs altogether because they aren't useful. The crazy thing is that modern day whales, if you look in the anatomy of a whale, those legs still exist, but they're not functional. They're just bones and cartilage that still exist there as a reminder that these whales were once hind-legged, dog-like creatures. Pretty crazy to think about. So to sum things up, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution states that all species of organisms arise and develop through the natural selection of small inherited variations that increase the individual's ability to compete, survive, and reproduce. Over long periods of time, we can compare members of species with their ancestors to observe how they evolved in order to survive. A species' ecosystem affects how the population adapts. The most effective characteristics for obtaining food, finding a mate, and providing for offspring will be passed on to the next generation, eventually to the whole species. Yes, wow. So, how does this apply to humans? Well, humans are unique in that we are much less affected by natural selection. We experience much less danger and restrictions than most species for a few distinct reasons. So if you think of giraffes, right, we were talking about giraffes, in that photo, it's actually much more reality than it is for humans. That photo was the short-legged or the short-necked giraffe just died. And over time, short-necked giraffes are just obsolete compared to their tall counterparts, right? While as humans, almost all humans, sadly some don't get the same rights, but almost all humans, I would say 98% of humans, have almost the same rights. And not the fact that they just have the ability to a fair trial. They can't be killed because it's illegal, right? Of course, you can't force animals to not kill each other. This is how they live. But we are different, right? So we face different restrictions, less dangers, and the restrictions in that we have almost unlimited resources in almost all parts of the world. Some places are less fortunate, but humans in general, 7.6 billion of us, most of us don't have to worry about finding food for that night and feeding our family, but most animals do. We're also omnivores, and we have no common predators. There are no predators that naturally feed upon humans. So species superiority. Humans have two important characteristics that have allowed us to spread across the globe and revolutionize life on Earth. These are, and I find these really amazing and eye-opening, we have the ability to relay and store information. You think about it, no other animal on Earth, or no amphibian, no bird, no insect, has the ability to store information and then pass it along to the next generation. That's not how they work. So, the most amazing minds of our lives, right? Einstein, Darwin, Edison, Mandela. They're just amazing people who sadly passed away, but their information, their lives' foundings, they didn't because we're able to store that information. So if you really think about it, every single human has the access to this stuff. So we will always be innovating, and generally, the most like-minded individuals have the exact same information, the exact same skills that the most amazing individuals from the past have as well. That kind of information isn't lost in each generation. Pretty amazing to think about. Now the second thing is the ability to create tools and weapons. No other species, again, has this ability. It's the ability to do things more efficiently, not with our own hands, but by using our minds to use resources, to craft things, to make us more efficient. Of course, if you look at a human, right, we will lose a fight with a bear, right? We'll lose a fight with a horse. There's no way we're going to be able to kill a lion on our own, right? But of course, our ancestors and we now were able to make tools that allowed us to do that. We also made strategies, things like that. And the ability to make things more efficient than our own selves is something that no other species has. And this is why we tend to be more superior, and it's why we've revolutionized life on Earth. It's why we have the ability to send stuff around the world, travel around the world, expect the right to live no matter where you are. No other animal species has that ability. So what's your takeaway? As natural selection applies to all species of organisms, it applies to humans as well, just not as much. Despite constant innovation and an improved way of life, humans have still evolved over the course of 6 million years. Our population of nearly 7.6 billion is a result of evolution from the early ape-like hominids to complex, tool-crafting humans. Evolution is a collection of timestamps. Think about that, a collection of timestamps from different species during their time on Earth. It's pretty crazy. Humans haven't been on Earth for so long, right? The Earth is more than 2 billion years old. Humans have only been here for a few thousand. Just think about that. We are less than a 0.1% of the Earth's life. And yet, we have evolved so quickly. If you think about humans, right? If you think about how we've only been here for 6 million years, and real humans with the ability to study history have only been around for a few thousand, we really are crazy, amazing, different. So if you think about evolution as this, right? Humans are something else. We already covered that, right? But if you think about how you are right now, you are the result of victors, right? Of people who survived, people who reproduced, people who won at life. You are the result of that. So you will do, and I have no doubt you will do the exact same thing. That's the crazy thing about evolution. You know right now that you are the result of victors, right? Of people who survived long enough to reproduce. So I hope you enjoyed Evolution of Populations. I'm Landon. Have a great day.